Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a Boeing 737 pilot and a member of PMDG's tech team. In today's video we'll have a look at one of the strangest looking aircraft that we actually have for Microsoft Flight Simulator, with the exception of the Imperial Star Destroyer and a couple other ones you can find on flightsim.to. And this is the Edgley Optica EA-7, made by developer GotFriends. Now, there is a second version of the very same airplane available from OBX, but overall I find the GotFriends version a little bit nicer in terms of the visuals, so I asked them if I could get a review copy, and they have been so kind to provide me with a free copy. So, this much for the disclaimer at the very beginning of the video. I have gotten a free copy, but before I decided if I want to have a look at the OBX or the GotFriends one, I compared them on the internet and actually found that the GotFriends one is a little bit nicer than the OBX one. So that conclusion was already made before I even contacted GotFriends about a review copy. So that being said, let us have a quick look at what this airplane is all about. The EA-7 has been designed in the 1970s as an area for aerial photography and for in-flight surveillance. So, as you are going to notice straight away from the interesting looking cockpit, the designers have basically shaped the flight deck a little bit like a helicopter. And that's because that is basically what it is about. To take over tasks that have been traditionally performed by helicopters, such as aerial surveillance, so for example checking power lines or checking pipelines. However, to combine them with the efficiency of a fixed-wing airplane. And that is basically what this airplane is all about, and that is what it is actually very, very good in. We're standing here at Essen-Mülheim Airport, which is the airport where I did my commercial pilot license, and from here we'll take a small tour over some of the Ruhrpott, as we call it in German, and the area where I actually grew up myself. And of course there would be no better plane for this than the EA-7, since it is designed for looking outside. Which, if I'm totally honest, you probably have to do because the cockpit looks a little bit like a helicopter. And you guys know that I'm convinced that helicopters only fly because they are so ugly that the ground doesn't want to have anything to do with them. But let's have a more detailed look, shall we? While saying that the plane is looking ugly, I actually mean the real one. And the iteration of it in Flight Simulator is actually looking pretty good. Well, I'm saying pretty good, of course, for something that looks ugly in first place. But we can see three-dimensional gauges. The texturing, well, on the sides over here it can be a little bit not so nice, but look for example here at the circuit breakers, and they're all actually simulated. So full working circuit breakers in this one, even though they're a little bit hidden and you'll have to move around a little bit in the cockpit in order to even find them. Apart from that, overall setup of the airplane is really made like a helicopter, but we have 3 seats next to each other in the front here, so that means 1 pilot and 2 passengers. Talking about 2 passengers. Yes, they are real. No, I have not modded anything. So, these are our passengers, but for those of you who prefer dogs over cats, cats over dogs, or just prefer a clean airplane, we have a little switch up here, which can be used to switch around our passengers a little bit. So, a little bit of playing around here, but I really like the simple idea that you can have passengers like this. So, personally, I'm all in for this. Do note that when you are adding or removing cats and dogs, then the weight of the plane is actually changing. Talking about the weight, that is something really, really interesting in the EA-7. So, looking at the fuel gauges down here, we have around about half fuel in it right now. And that is, they've been exactly at half before I did 3 traffic patterns with it. So, this is the fuel that's been used up with 3 patterns, or around 20 minutes flight time. Now, with totally full fuel tanks, this plane can easily go 7.5 hours. So, that's again with the original mission in mind, that the plane should fly for aerial surveillance or aerial photography, and long flight times can be especially useful if you have anything to be checked out for a little bit longer time. So the first flight was made on the 14th December 1979, and the engine is driving a 5-bladed fixed-pitch ducted fan, which is hidden beyond or behind the cockpit, and therefore the Optica is thought to be the world's quietest powered aircraft. And if we just have a look at it from the outside here, then we'll pretty much immediately see why that is. So here's our engine inside. And yes, it looks interesting, but let's see if it flies interesting as well, shall we? So, here we are then. For the checklists, they are delivered with the in-game checklist only, so the actual flight manual does not give us any checklists. Let's go ahead then, pre-flight checks. And they're pretty easy. Cabin doors closed, companion knob. We selected which passengers we want. And we have a winter kit knob in here as well, which is going to install skis outside the aircraft. And that is actually going to change the aircraft braking performance. So if you do want to fly it, for example, in Alaska in winter, then be sure to have your skis on. But be sure that your runway is long enough, because your braking performance is significantly going to be reduced on icy runways, which is modeled. So, before starting engine checklist. External power, well, we don't need any today. Master battery switch on. Verify fuel quantity. They're almost half full. That is more than we need. Panel light switch off. Pushback not required. Handbrake lever is pulled. Aileron trim wheel, this one is in neutral. Mixture lever full rich. So let me quickly get rid of the power. So, mixture lever full rich. Throttle lever, 5 to 10% opened. Elevator trim neutral. Fuel selector, both. And that's the before starting engine checks complete. Let's go ahead and start our engines. So, fuel pump on, strobe lights on, magnetos. Okay.
Clear prop!
And here we go with our engine running. So, how much do you hear from it? Nothing, you say? Let me slightly change the audio here. So now the simulator is running at full volume. And as we can hear, we have silence. Almost. That's really, really nice. Okay, let's go on with the checklist. Generator switch on. Verify positive amperage. That is down here, and we are in the positive. Fuel pump switch off. External power off. Starting engines checklist complete. Let's quickly look at the taxi checklist. Altimeter calibration set. Directional gyro calibration set. Transponder is already on. Nav light switch on. Pitot heat on. Mixture lever, so we can go 50% mixture, save a little bit of fuel. Throttle lever, 10 to 20% for taxi. Handbrake lever release. Okay, then off we go. Okay, let's try not to run this gentleman over here. But this plane got quite some wingspan. Yeah, Good that it's so low, we just went right beneath it, or right below the King Air. What we're going to notice is that it actually accelerates pretty quickly during taxi. So if we have some longer straight lines, chances are we will have to brake before going into the next turn. Do note how nicely the shadows are moving across the panel here. That's something I really like. Alright, total, the plane is getting pretty quick on the straight lines. However, it is not recommended to put the engine to idle, because that could actually damage the spark plugs. So we'll just keep it around 1000 RPMs, and then we'll just have to brake before we reach the next turn. So, some of the sound effects you hear in the background, as always, are from FS Realistic, so not everything you hear right now is necessarily from the airplane itself. However, I do find, even for reviews, that it is best to show the airplane in their, let's call it, natural environment, so I'm not going to change anything in my simulator to default just to show off the airplane. Alright, so let's quickly run through the rest of the checklist here. So, takeoff checks. Squawk altitude. Yep, transponder is on alt anyway. Landing light switch on. Mixture lever. Full ridge. Flap selector. 10 degrees. Handbrake released. And then throttle lever is going to be at 100% for the takeoff. And as soon as we're airborne, we got to reduce the thrust to 2700 RPMs. So that's only at 2700 RPMs maximum engine speed as well. Something not covered by the checklist, but I do want my fuel pumps to be on for takeoff, just in case. Just an additional layer of safety here, and actually the vast majority of aircraft normally have that in their checklist, so I'm not sure why it is not in this one. Alright. Then notice how little runway this airplane is going to take. Here we go. Set takeoff thrust. Finally, we can hear the engine a bit. And rotate. And we're flying. So, 65 knots is climb speed on this one. I'll quickly bring the engine back to 2700 RPMs already. We can feel straight away that the airplane is in its element in slow flight. So, flaps up, fuel pump off. And let's start a right-hand turn here. As soon as we are beyond the small farm down there. That graveyard you can see just in the middle of the picture, that's where the traffic patterns go over. So let's fly there. Alright, traffic pattern altitude, reducing thrust 2500 RPMs. Right, leaving the pattern, let's head towards those 4 large buildings down there. Those are basically a very good point for heading out from Esmulan towards the north. A little bit turbulent, and the airplane actually got huge wings, so it is very susceptible to turbulence. Let's reduce thrust a little bit further. We shouldn't fly in the amber band with turbulence like this. And we've crossed over the railroad down here. That means we're clear of the controlled airspace above. However, let's just stay here at 1500 feet, because overall, visibility is what this airplane is about, so looking outside is what it's about, so I'll just stay down low. This, by the way, is the area where I did my very first flights in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and the Ruhrpott is by default covered in photogrammetry by Microsoft, so these were basically my first impressions of this flight simulator, and I just have to say that I was totally blown away when I got my hands on the beta back then. Let's head over to the right here. So the area that we're approaching now is a large shopping center in the city where I grew up, in Oberhausen, the Centro, as it's called. And let's just see how absolutely lovely the default photogrammetry is in this area. By the way, you don't even need the World Update Germany for this. This is already by default included in Microsoft Flight Simulator. And as we are just about to have a look here, let's reduce our airspeed a little bit and use the excellent slow flying characteristics of the EA-7 in order to actually look at the area below. So, reducing thrust even further, aiming for a speed of 70 knots. It is a little turbulent, so not quite as easy to control. So that's the sea life down there. I can only recommend you a visit there. It's really worth it. Alright, from here let's go on a little bit. Fly over at Oberhausen. And just enjoy the absolutely beautiful scenery that we have in Microsoft Flight Simulator. By the way, guys, I will probably say more than once in this video that Microsoft Flight Simulator is looking beautiful. And I just want to point out straight away that the fact that I'm saying Microsoft Flight Simulator is so nice in this video has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that X-Plane 12 has just been released today. So I'm not trying to set any subtle messages here, like, guys, Microsoft is so much better than X-Plane. No. That's not what this video is about. In fact, I have no idea if it is, because I haven't tried X-Plane 12 yet, even though I am probably going to give it a try over the next couple of days, but we'll see about that. For now, we'll continue in what we've got over here. We'll just enjoy some of the excellent scenery that we have below. And as said, this is default scenery. This is all default photogrammetry. So let's have a look from the outside as well. You can see how the plane is fighting the turbulence here. But with those huge wings, I'm not really surprised to see that it's having a hard time here. So, not really surprised at all. But in fact, we can see that right now it's flying at around 70 knots, and this is basically where you would want it to be for aerial surveillance or aerial photography. So, if we were to inspect a power line or something, like down here, then we would of course want to fly at a rather slow speed in order to actually get good visuals and get the chance to actually look at what we're seeing, and we don't want to race over it at a couple hundred knots. And this is where the EA-7 actually shines. It is equipped with an autopilot, and the handling of the autopilot is, well, typical general aviation, I would say. If you're used to airline autopilot, then it will need a little bit of time for you to adapt to the way that the autopilot is actually working. But let's give it a try over here. So, oh, if only it wouldn't be so turbulent, then I would actually try to match the heading bug over here. Oh yeah. So, autopilot on. It engages in vertical speed and altitude is armed. So, here we go. Right, and it does what it's supposed to do. It engages at the exact vertical speeds where you have put the autopilot on, so that was 200 feet a minute, and altitude is armed set for 1,400 feet, so it's climbing us all the way up, and this is our basic configuration. We're following the railway tracks over here. Would be a typical inspection mission for the EA-7 to follow the railway tracks and make sure there are no obstructions over there, make sure that this is not what it looks like, so that the trees are not actually grown over the tracks. So that would be one typical mission for the EA-7. Another one would be traffic surveillance. So have you guys ever wondered where those news about the current traffic jams and everything are coming from? Well, this is pretty much it. The companies are usually sending out aircraft, like an EA-7 for example, or over here in North Rhine-Westphalia they are using a Tecnam 2008 if I'm not mistaken, together with two Cessna 172s. And they're basically following the highways and reporting all traffic jams. And this is exactly the kind of mission profile that in the EA-7 we would be thriving for, and that we would be trying to follow. Overall, I do believe that the autopilot is doing a very, very good job in the EA-7. And it's flying smooth, it's following the commands, and it doesn't jerk out. And honestly, for a general aviation autopilot, that is really all I'm asking for. Because many GA autopilots tend to mess you over. So they are by far not as good usually, as they tend to be in flight simulators. Right, let's try out a couple of the low speed characteristics. My English. Let's try out a couple of the low speed handling qualities and bring the airplane up to a higher altitude. And I'll put the autopilot off again, because hand flying the EA-7 is quite a joy, I have to say. Before I started recording this video, I flew it for approximately 1 hour, a couple traffic patterns and a little bit of air work. And that is pretty much all preparation that I have done for this video. Besides of doing some research beforehand, of course. So that's just to give you an idea of the previous research that I have done. So just in front of us here, there is an airport coming up. That is Dienstlaken Schwarze Heide, which is the airfield where I actually started flying, initially on gliders, later on in the club to do my PPL. So let's head over there and let's cross to the north of the airport where we have the training area. Of course, right over here, over the forest, we could do our stalls and everything as well. However, we have the traffic pattern just below us and we really don't want to stall ourselves down into the traffic pattern. So let's just head up a little bit further to the north and then we can do our air work over there. In the meantime, note that I'm currently flying on pretty much almost full thrust. I do still have a little bit of room left for the thrust lever to move forward. However, that would make the engine exceed the 2700 RPM limit. So I have to have a small eye on my engine RPMs over here while we are actually climbing. Now, something that surprised me in the EA-7 is that we actually have a G meter up here. So if we look up here, we have an accelerometer next to our clock and to our ski and passenger button, to call it that way. Oops, just get the airplane under control again. 3,000 feet should be sufficient for the airwork that we want to do today. So I could actually not find any G-loading limits in the manual. Might have missed them, but the sheer fact that it has a G meter suggests to me that the plane is not limited to the typical 2.5 positive, 1 negative, like our airliners would be, but that it is indeed capable for a little bit more. Now, talking about capabilities, the EA-7 can go all the way up to 14,000 feet, and we actually do have an oxygen bottle in the plane. Even though, no, this is a fire extinguisher. But as far as I could find out in my previous research, there is a possibility to install additional oxygen in the EA-7. Right, so let's climb all the way up. 3,500 looks good to me. So let's start doing a little bit of our air work. The actual training area we are using in real life is located just to the north of the river Lippe that we have in front of us. Because right now we are flying over the glider training area. So when you're a flight student flying gliders in Dienstlaken, you have the glider field just up here next to the asphalt runway, and basically the area from here over to the highway over here, to the river, and to the highway over there. That is the area where flight students would typically go on their solo flights, provided that they are actually not flying cross-country but doing local flights. Alright, so we have reached our training area. So let's start with steep turns, 45 degrees left and right. The aim is to hold the altitude, so 3,800 it is. The plane actually seems to have a tendency to increase the bank angle here, which aerodynamically is maybe not the very best thing, but it can happen on a real plane as well, depending on the choices the designers make. Let's go with a 60-degree right-hand turn now, see what that looks like. This is probably not what the airplane's been built for, but it has to be able to take this. And if we look at the G meter, we just brought it to a little bit more than 2, so 2.5 Gs. That is quite alright. If you do level 60-degree bank turn, you're getting into 2 Gs, and they have to be able to take that. Right, next up is slow flight, so let's reduce our thrust and see where we can get our airplane. I'll quickly trade a little bit of speed for altitude as well. So 4,000 feet, 60 knots. And it does feel a little bit weak in the controls now, like I would expect it to do. So let's see how slow we can actually get the plane. $55. 50 knots. This is with the flaps still retracted, by the way. Here you can see it, the flaps are still in. So, 50 knots. Very gentle behavior, by the way. See, we lost like 50 feet. Now, on the previous exercise I made it with 0 feet loss. Let's actually get the flaps out now. So that's full flaps. Still at 4,000, 50 knots, 45 knots-ish. Okay, let's get it out. Thrust is on, speed is good. Alright, well we have the flaps out. Let's put the airplane in actual stall and see what it's going to behave like. I have a feeling that with the tailplane that we see here in the Optica, this will probably have some very interesting actual stall behavior. So let's go ahead and do that. This time I'm not going to recover. And this is actually nicer than I thought. Okay, flaps retract. Don't want to overspeed the flaps. So let's do the same in a clean configuration this time. Power is off. That is okay. That is actually a lot nicer behavior than I expected. Even though we did lose quite some altitude on these, but that's not too bad. That's why we climbed up high earlier on. Okay, slowly turn it back into the direction where we came from. Oh, and it's getting a bit more turbulent now. Let's see. What influence does that have on our slow flight performance? Nope, that was actually still alright. So, pretty solid handling behavior, I have to say. It didn't try to enter any spins or so, so that is very, very nice. Perfect, so let's actually see how fast the thing can go. If they say that our limiting engine RPM is 2700, then let's put it right at 2700. Keep it level in 2,500 feet, and let's see how much the thing is going to accelerate. Flaps are all in once again, of course. So as I told you, the design cruising speed is in the area of around 70 knots. However, I do know that flight simmers are not going to follow that, but are going to go quite a bit faster. Well, let's find out how fast this will actually get. It looks like we're actually stuck in the region around 100 knots over here. Of course, we still have quite a bit of fuel on board, as we can see on our gauges down here. So the looks outside are actually really excellent. But this is a plane that would probably have been really nice back in the days in FSX and P3D, where the first photorealistic terrain add-ons came out. I remember in 2012 and 2013, I believe, Aerosoft released the VFR Germany sceneries, which was basically satellite imagery for the complete country, which cost like 50 euros per set, and you needed 4 sets to cover the entire country. So that was expensive back then, like really expensive. And it did by far not look as good as what we can see in Microsoft Flight Simulator now. And the sole reason I'm saying that is actually, with the EA-7 we have an excellent airplane for looking at scenery, and all of a sudden we have the entire world available to us. That is really exciting. That's exactly the reason, I guess, why there are actually 2 EA-7s that have been made. So both GotFriends and OrbX made them independent of one another, and they both chose an airplane that I had never ever heard of before. So that is quite a coincidence, is it? Actually though, the GotFriends EA-7 has been first, and not the OrbX one. So, crossing over at Dienstlaken. Sometimes I miss this field. Sometimes I really miss those days. But then again, I'm climbing into the 737 and thinking, yeah, this is it. Right, so 105 knots. But we're getting into the turbulence again, so let's get it back below the maneuver speed, so below 95. Something I did notice is that this plane is very susceptible to up and down drafts. I mean, just looking at the wings, it does not really come as a surprise that when you're going into an up or down draft with this plane, it is going to react. Alright, 95 knots, that's what we want to go at. Many of you are going to notice that I do have the GTN 750 installed on this plane. It actually comes as a separate but free download. So by default it comes with the GNS 430 and a separate transponder, and the GTN 750 is available as an option. Now, here comes a little bit of a split between different philosophies of how flight simmers want to fly. The majority of simmers are using the GPS and the autopilot to navigate when flying VFR. And that is understandable. That is acceptable, no doubt about it. If I'm flying VFR in real life, I'm doing exactly the same. I'm taking the additional safety of the GPS to help with the navigation. But what you will probably notice what I'm doing on this particular flight, I know the area we're flying around pretty well. So my GPS is set to something, but I'm actually not looking at it at all. The only thing I'm using it for is setting the radios, the transponder and the frequencies in this airplane, and the look outside is just so good. It is really a joy to fly VFR with this. And set yourself a challenge. Get some navigational charts for the area where you want to fly, and try it without the GPS at all. Like here you are. Set it to the menu and don't use it. And then go for a ride and try to figure out, just by the beauty of the Earth, where you are going. And I can only very much recommend this to anyone. We are all used to flying on instruments, and we are all used to just having the GPS to tell us where to go, but it is a whole different challenge to navigate just by the looks down on the Earth. Especially the area over here, the Warthog. Once you are overhead the area, it will not be quite that easy to determine where you want to go unless you know all the local landmarks, so give it a try. It is really fun, it is really challenging, and it is exactly where the EA-7 is in its elements. So, as we are approaching the Central once again, we'll set course back towards Essen-Mülheim, and when we are reaching Essen-Mülheim, we'll once again have to make sure not to accidentally fly into the controlled airspace, while at the same time we have to stay as high as possible to avoid the noise complaints from everyone downstairs. So, for us in the flight deck, the EA-7 is a very, very quiet airplane, but if we go outside, it is not all that quiet. It is still not a glider. Even though, talking about gliding, the EA-7 does have some very, very nice gliding characteristics. So, if you just want to switch off that engine, you're not allowed to, but, you know, I'm stopping that here. I'm stopping that here. Alright, so, slowly going back towards Essen-Mülheim, let's try to see if we can find those 4 houses once again. And there they are. So that basically marks the area where we want to fly over in order to start our approach to Essen-Mülheim. Also, we have the highway in front, and just beyond that there is a railway track that basically marks the area where the controlled airspace starts again. So let's take our thrust off, start our descent. 1500 feet is where the controlled airspace starts. We want to go down to 1400 for our traffic pattern. And it is quite turbulent, I have to say. It really is. But the overall airplane's behavior, while we can see the nose swinging around left and right in the turbulence, the overall plane's behavior and controllability is quite nice, so I am able to steer it quite precisely where I want it to go. So here's our highway. Behind that somewhere is going to be a railway track, and that is where the controlled airspace is going to start. Let's see if we can find the railway track. Okay, we're leaving the 4 houses to our right there. And we have our altitude. And here comes the railway track. So, 1400, that's where we want to be. Give it like 2300 RPMs. And here it is. Here's our railways. So now we are beneath the controlled airspace once again. Alright, so we are going to do one touch and go, and then we'll do full stop landing in order to show you the behavior of the airplane with not just a single but actually 2 landings. So as we come in, fuel pump on, landing lights on. Let's bring our speed down. And we have a water tower up here that is located exactly on the downwind. So we'll fly towards the field and then join the downwind from there on. As we slow the plane down, the effect of the turbulence is of course getting greater and greater. So here we go, slowly into the downwind. Adding a bit more thrust, I'll try to keep the speed around 80 knots here in the traffic pattern. That is already faster than the designed cruising speed of this plane, but overall we don't want to hold up all the traffic as well, do we? Then our base turn is going to lead us over the forest that we see right in front of the city of Essen down here. And then we'll follow along the highway to the final approach. This is actually how the traffic pattern is designed in Essen-Mülheim. So it is not the standard traffic pattern in a rectangular shape that we are all used to, but it actually got a little... It actually got a little cut in it. So let's turn to the right. Speed is now 60 knots. That is alright. Flaps 10. We'll give it a little bit extra lift here. Okay, that's our runway. Take some of the thrust out. Actually, all of it. Going right over the forest. Visibility, once again, is the one point where the EA-7 really shines. And next flap setting. Here's the highway. Okay, there's an airship flying off to the right over there. Don't want to get in conflict with that one. Okay, turning final. Flaps full. You do need quite a bit of thrust on final with the flaps in full, but if you look at this, then you immediately see why. Okay, power off. Flaps back to 10. Full thrust. $55, rotate. And we are flying again. Okay, 400 feet above ground, flaps up, fuel pump off, and we'll turn upwind. So, the airship is not a factor for us, very good. And here's the graveyard, so we'll make the turn. Climb power is set. 060 on the downwind heading, straight towards the water tower up front. here's a field. Still a lovely view outside, I have to say. I really can't get enough of this, even though I did like easily 100 traffic patterns here. Alright. So we'll reduce our speed. This time it's going to be a full stop landing. And I'm going to use this one to demonstrate the stopping capabilities of the EA-7. So we'll try to do this a very short field landing. The aim is to touch down right on the displaced threshold, and then I'll do maximum manual braking in order to show you where how quickly the airplane can be stopped on the runway. So, turning base. Not too much bank, flaps 10. Oh boy, I feel the need to fly traffic patterns with this at Frankfurt on the next Frankfurt Friday between all the airliners. But I don't think I should say this too loud. Some people might not be necessarily happy. Alright, turn base. Or turn base. And then we'll turn final when we are over the next houses up there. Alright, and we are on final. Okay, flaps maximum. So, let's try to put it exactly on the markers. And then it's gonna be maximum manual braking. And touchdown. Welcome to Essen-Mülheim. So this is about what this needs. Absolutely lovely plane. So, now comes the painful taxi to the apron along the entire runway pretty much, so bear with me. We'll get there eventually. Man, those are some pretty steep flaps here. They kind of remind me of the MD-11 flaps. Remember, the 11 had some huge flaps there. But you are going to notice that when you extend the flaps to the maximum position, you are actually going to need quite a bit of thrust. And we certainly can see where that comes from. Oh, engine to 1000 RPMs, not less. And off the runway we go. Well, let's take out the checklist then. After landing. First thing it says, park aircraft. Okay. Well, nice. In that case, fuel pump off, pitot heat off, landing light off, taxi light can't stay on. And the transponder is going to go into standby as well. Flaps. retract it, and we'll pull the mixture back to the half position. That should save us a little bit of fuel here on the taxi. Taxiing the EA-7 actually is pretty nice. Very easy to maintain the center line. The only moment where it becomes a little bit harder to taxi it, well, to taxi is the wrong term, it should rather be to take off with it, is when you're actually setting your takeoff thrust, because there is quite a moment induced by the huge fan. Alright, so don't let the wingspan confuse you. Yes, it is wide, but it is not that wide. And here we go. So, here we are. Handbrake is set, so let's have a look at the checklist. Park aircraft. Handbrake pulled, throttle just a tiny bit above idle. Taxi light off, landing light off. Interesting, I want to switch the strobe light off before we actually kill the engine. Okay. Well, no, we're not gonna do that. In that case, we'll shut the engine down. Interesting as well that they apparently want to shut it down with the magnetos and not with the mixture, as you would normally do in other airplane. I still have to find out why that is, so my apologies for not being able to tell you at the moment. However, this concludes our flight with the EA-7. So I hope that you have enjoyed this just as much as I did. So 40 minutes, that actually turned out quite a bit longer than I initially thought it would. So thank you very much for joining. I really hope that you got a good impression of the Optica and that you liked this little first look / review. So what do I think of it in the end? The visuals of the plane are great. That goes both for the passengers as well as for the actual aircraft. So even though it is a little ugly looking airplane, I have to say, that is due to the design of the real one and not due to the way how GotFriends simulated it. So the graphics, really good, nothing to complain about. The flight model feels really nice, so I don't quite know how accurate that would be, because I don't have experience in an actual Optica. So my idea on the flight model simply comes from the general aviation experience that I have from flying gliders that also have huge wingspan, and of course from the 737, even though that doesn't really count here. So overall, a really entertaining flight model. I'm unable to comment on how realistic that is, however it didn't feel like there was anything grossly off. And sounds, well, you don't quite hear the sounds all too much in the cockpit, which is a pretty good thing. So they say this is probably the quietest powered aircraft you can find, and I can only sign on that based from what's in the manual. So overall, nice looking aircraft. The sounds are believable, even though I can imagine that some of you would hope for a little bit more sounds and for the sounds to be a little bit more prominent. So I can definitely understand how you could get to that conclusion, especially since all the vibrations and everything that you have in real life that lets you know that you are there more or less has to be done through the sound set in Flight Simulator. So I don't know, maybe a little bit rattling and everything could be added there, but that's where FS Realistic really filled the gap nicely, I have to say. And it flies believable, and it certainly flies very, very entertaining, and it is certainly a lot of fun to fly it. So all of that said, thank you very much for watching. And if you do want to support the channel, then I would, as always, appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below. Let me know what you think of the EA-7. Do you have it? Do you maybe have the competitor from OrbX? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for joining, and I'm looking forward to see you all again very soon.